Okay, so I've had the iPhone 15 Pro Max for about a week, and if you're thinking about getting this phone, there is some stuff we really have to talk about. Apple's new iPhone has been out a while now, and there are 1,000,001 deep dive reviews out there if you want to know what this phone is like to own. This video, however, is all about the stuff you need to be mindful of before you go dropping $1,000+ on Apple's latest device. And crucially, there is one massive piece of advice I need to share if you choose to invest your hard-earned money on this phone. And before we get into any of that, here's my super brief 1 week review on all the good stuff. Yes, the new camera upgrades are absolutely incredible. In fact, I've been thinking about getting rid of my trusty B-roll camera because, to be honest, this iPhone is doing a much better job right now. Honestly, the power in this device is like carrying around a compact film studio in your pocket, whilst this, well, it's like carrying a single tool from your toolbox. And yes, the action button that replaces the mute switch is pretty cool. You can set it to do whatever you'd like. I've settled for it being my camera opener, but I can also make a shortcut for pretty much anything, such as starting a conversation with ChatGPT. Pretty cool. But if you have an older iPhone and you want an extra button, you can actually program all of that same stuff to a triple tap of your backplate using the accessibility features. So maybe less cool. And yes, USB-C charging is finally here, although I've got to be honest, I only ever charge on a wireless pad at the moment, but it does mean that I can do really weird stuff like actually have my phone connected to my big productivity monitor and stream games from my PlayStation at pretty swift speeds. And yes, all that fuss Apple made about the new titanium body is absolutely true. This is much lighter than the previous versions. Now, I'm upgrading from an iPhone 13 Pro, and the difference is noticeable from the minute you pick it up. But you know, weight isn't everything. At least that's what I keep telling myself every time I go to the fridge. This is still a big phone, and you will feel and see it in your pocket if you tend to carry it around here like I do. And weirdly, one of the only places I've genuinely found myself thinking, gosh, this is really a much lighter phone, is when I've been sat in the toilet, hiding from my kids. But this phone launch has definitely not been all roses. This new light titanium body on the Pro models has thrown up a bunch of issues for Apple since this phone has been seen out in the wild this week, and whew, I don't think a Steve Jobs-esque "you're holding it wrong" is gonna cut it this time, Apple.
People were touching. X marks the spot here.
So first of all, the reason Apple have switched to a titanium is because it's a harder, stronger metal. It's super tough, but the combination of titanium plus this rounded edge seems to make the phone much easier to break than all previous models. Now, the team over at Jerry Rig Everything managed to do this just by applying a small amount of pressure. So if you put this phone in your back pocket and you sit on your phone accidentally, yeah, even C is not going to be able to save you. Likewise, because the backplate is now an entire piece of glass, technically it is easier and up to 3 times cheaper to replace it if you break it, which is good. But I've seen some pics emerging this week showing just how fragile this is as a result. So yes, you can replace your back glass quicker, but the entire camera module might fall off as a result. It's a bit of a gamble. Also, if you're thinking that titanium is stronger and therefore won't scratch, well, it will. The best thing you can do if you own this phone is slap a case on. And while you're at it, just suck it up and throw on a decent tempered glass screen protector too. I know people like strolling around with these things absolutely naked, but unless you're made of money, it's just not worth it. I personally love these cases from Caseku. Their Cloud Cush cases don't add much bulk to the phone, but they add tons of protection and this cool little pull-out ring that lets you prop it up for calls or doing anything else like watching my YouTube videos. If you want something a bit more showy and a little less functional, these aramid fiber cases from Pitaka are also really nice, and they maximize that sense of reduced weight due to the materials they used. And both of these work really nicely with MagSafe chargers and accessories alike. Neither of these brands are sponsoring the channel this week, but I'm going to leave some links to them down in the description. And believe it or not, there's more to be concerned about here if you've got this phone on order. A bunch of people have been reporting some really troubling stuff about this phone overheating to the point that it's actually too hot to hold. And so far, there seem to be a few schools of thought as to what's happening. So firstly, some people like MKBHD have said, do you know what? It's not a thing, except for when you're using certain apps like Instagram. So it kind of is a thing then, because lots of people choose to have Instagram on their phone. Secondly, most engineers have explained that heating problems are likely to be an issue, and that is part of the trade-off of using this lighter, stronger titanium frame, and how this is crucially different to the aluminium frame or aluminum, depending on where you're from. It is really aluminium though, just look at how it's spelled. Anyway, to explain this, let's imagine two different parties in two different rooms. So the first room represents an aluminium frame, and the second room represents a titanium frame. Now imagine that conversations between the guests generate heat, and for everyone to remain comfortable, this heat needs to be dispersed effectively. So at the aluminium party, the walls are like porous sponge, which absorb all the conversations and heat and let it dissipate out into the outside air, keeping the room comfortable for continued lively discussions. On the other hand, the titanium room has got walls made of thick, less porous material that can hold the same number of guests, and it's a bit more elegant and lighter in structure, but it doesn't absorb and dissipate the conversations or heat just as effectively. And as the energy rises, the party becomes gradually warmer, making it less and less comfortable for the party guests to continue their discussions, until eventually someone accidentally sits down on their iPhone and breaks it, and the party's over. Now, if you go along with the engineer's theory, there's very little that can be done by way of software updates and such, because it's just the consequence of the hardware decisions Apple have made here. I mean, if they alter the processor via a software update in the future to make sure it doesn't work quite as hard or fast as it can, then that might help, but what's the point in buying an iPhone with the latest crazy powerful chip? Now, the other reason for this overheating might be to do with the iPhone 15's new USB-C port for charging after they made the switch from using Lightning for the past 10 years. Now, I've got to be honest here, I have a ton of MagSafe chargers around the house, and so far I've only ever used MagSafe to charge the phone. And yeah, I haven't noticed any heat issues whatsoever when charging. However, something I did notice is that this new iPhone got incredibly hot during the initial setup process after I restored it from the cloud backup of my old iPhone. Now, it's not been that hot since, but I've yet to do anything truly taxing, such as put this camera system through its paces using ProRes log recording in 4K or anything like that. So we'll see how it all goes, and I'll keep you posted. Meanwhile, if you're in the early upgraders group and you've got this phone, have you noticed any of these issues cropping up so far? Let me know down in the comments. So there we go, Apple's new flagship phone for pro users, whatever that means these days. I would say be very careful with this one. I'll be back with a more comprehensive look at what this phone can do in a month or so, and meanwhile, if you want to take a deep dive into what kind of apps I keep on this phone, I made a full rundown which is coming up in 3, 2,